Cool. Awesome.
Awesome. So to kick things off, I normally start with the standard boring ass introduction, but return guests. So we've got Steve here from Wolves at the Gate. We were just mentioning March of 22. We had a talk before eulogies. Let's talk a little bit about to kick things off for people that maybe haven't followed your journey since eulogies. What's been going on? Because again, like I just said to you, you guys have been on a fucking tear. Like it seems like every time I get a press release from the guys over at Atom Splitter, you guys are coming out with something, either a new tour, you're doing support for stuff, you've got videos dropping all the time. What's life like for Wolves at the Gate in this moment?
Yeah, I mean, in this moment, man, it all just like feels like such a blur. It's different being the one. Like if you were asking me about bands that I like, that's sort of the perspective I have. But when you're in sort of the trenches of it, you almost like kind of forget. But yeah, we have been busy. After Eulogies dropped, yeah, we did a cool support tour with Memphis May Fire, which was a lot of fun. Yeah, those guys were great, and it was a great tour. And we actually had started thinking about and talking about the idea of Wasteland around that time when I guess that's the summer of 2022.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it hadn't completely like formed in my mind. It was still very much like very rough.
Mm-hmm.
And while I'd been like working on that, we had always, you know, we loved covering songs, but like we just never really had time to do that.
Yeah.
And we did a cover EP, a while back. I mean, it was like maybe 2012 or 2013.
Yeah.
And so we, just for fun, I started working on a cover um, of a song called Heathens by 21 Pilots.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was actually a song that I wanted to like take apart and figure out the chord progression and what are like, because it's such a cool, dark, melodic song. I wanted to kind of figure out like what are all these like components of this song and what makes it, what am I drawn to about it? And as I was listening to it, and kind of taking it apart and learning it, I kind of was hearing ideas of like things that would translate for our band. And so I just started basically covering it, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and I was about halfway through and I just sent it out to the guys and they're like, this is cool. Uh, Finish it. And so I did. And that's kind of was like the match that started the fire, of
Yeah.
us doing a whole covers album in between, yeah, Eulogies and Wasteland.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the funny thing is I think that process happens to a lot of artists, right? Like you catch this song that scratches some sort of itch in your brain and in the
Hmm.
creative space, and you start to kind of pull it apart and dissect it, and it's like, oh, that's really cool and interesting. And then immediately, because of the passion that you have for your project, it's like, well, we could scream there, and that would
Hmm.
add this element, and we could do a breakdown here. So it's really cool because I think the thing that you guys do really well with those covers is, to me, they're not just covers, they're kind of reimaginings of the song, because it's
Hmm.
not like, oh, we're going to get up there and play it just like them and just have Steve sing on it instead. It's,
Hmm.
how would Wolves at the Gate done this song if we wrote it?
Right. Right. And that was really what we were trying to do was, yeah, how do you stay true to the song, but stay true to yourself, and that was kind of the fun, you know, challenge of doing that. And also it was just a no pressure, you know, just kind of bucket list sort of thing
Yeah.
where we were just like, let's just embrace it and have fun. Because it started off with one song, and then, the thought was like, could we do an EP? And then as like the ideas were getting thrown out, it was kind of like, maybe this is an album.
Yeah.
Um, and so, and what that also did was just gave me more time to develop the idea of what I was wanting to do with Wasteland. Because I realized once I got to a certain point, I was kind of like, okay, I don't want to rush this thing. And um, none of it was like planned. It wasn't like, let's do a cover album that'll give us time. Like it just
Right.
kind of happened. And I was like, oh, that could actually work that way. I'm sure people think there's like this like cabal of like talking heads that are like working out what bands, maybe for like huge bands, for us,
Right.
not so much. We're just trying to do what we enjoy and what we love and what we're passionate about. And at this stage in our lives, the question is like, are we having fun? You
Yeah.
know? And if it's not fun, like just need to hang it up. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's something, it takes time to learn that lesson. I think that, at some point, you know, there are definitely artists that have, for lack of a better term, overstayed their welcome, right? That
hmm
like maybe the vocals aren't there as well anymore. And
hmm
they keep doing it. And yes, it's fun, but at the same time, like, are you providing the product that people want? And I
hmm
think with you guys in the position that you're in, you know, I, I don't think you're calling it a throwaway album either, but the covers album was kind of this um buffer, if you will. Like, it's a safe space because they're covers, so everybody's already going to know the songs. We don't have to take them overly serious in the sense of
hmm
like, if people don't like our cover of Heathens, okay, it's not really our song. It's okay that they didn't like our version of it.
hmm
And then to your point, giving you that space to kind of finish the construction of Wasteland, um, which from everything I've seen is incredibly in depth. So I want to get into that because I think you do this awesome thing where you're doing kind of a concept album of sorts, but not
hmm
in the like Coheed and Cambria. There's a whole fucking universe that you have to follow to get the story.
Yeah.
What's it been like, kind of walking through the wasteland, pun
hmm
intended here, with the mental health side of stuff, and going through that darkness to figure out how can I portray this.
Yeah, I mean, it, yeah, it was there's parts of it that were hard. Because in this album, The Wasteland, I'm capturing I'm capturing really like sobering truths. I'm capturing and honestly, in a lot of ways, like the album is just a mirror for like my heart and my mind in on one end of a spectrum, I guess, of
Mm-hmm.
my own struggles. Because really, the whole album is about this idea of lawlessness and living selfishly. And what is the result of living that way is basically trying to just satisfy like every, desire of my flesh and my mind. And th- the end of that is it's a mirage. It
Mm-hmm.
actually never satisfies. It's basically like a dirty well that invites you to come drink, and every time you drink from it's gross, and it doesn't actually satisfy your thirst, but it invites you to come again and drink again.
Yeah.
um and and so yeah, it was. I remember I talked to my wife a lot about lyrics as I'm writing them and just ideas that I have. She's such a like really helpful like sounding board for me. And I remember at the end of the album talking through all of it with her and going through the lyrics, and she just said it perfectly. She just said, "I can't wait to get out of the wasteland." And I was like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, me too." Um, but for me personally, I believe, because our songs our songs they deal with sort of some of the things you deal with in the here and now, but our songs are primarily about thinking about eternal things, thinking
Mm-hmm.
about God and your what do you believe about him, what's true about him, what happens to us when we die, where is our hope, where is our trust? And you know, I think um thinking through some of these concepts that are in the album, the reality is we're trying to lead people to a place of hope, and
Yeah.
peace and rest and comfort. And what I believe is for us to see, the great grace and salvation that I believe that God offers through Jesus, you have to sort of take a look in the mirror and see some of the darkness that's there, and then to see that you can be loved and embraced and comforted despite all of your brokenness. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things about the gospel message. And so, yeah, you kind of have to walk through the muck and the mire, and
Yeah.
what the character is doing. So
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that because, I've often said, I do a mental health podcast as well. And I talk about, you can't see the stars without the darkness, right? So like
yeah,
there
100%. Yep.
there are bright points in your life and you have to have that darkness so that you can see and recognize where those bright points are.
Yeah, and I've heard you've actually heard like a number of like old theologians that I read actually said that
Hmm.
same exact phrase. You can't see the brightness and beauty of the stars unless it's on the backdrop of the darkness of the sky.
Yeah.
And the thing that's, really interesting too is as well like you need to know your enemy too.
Hmm.
If you're talking about it in the realm of mental health, like the song Parasite exists so that people would look at that song and see, you know, essentially like the fact that like sin lies to you and it tells you that it can give you it makes empty promises and that's
Yeah.
all it does, and that's why at the end of the song the character is basically lamenting the whole time. It's like you lie, you deceive, and then you say reanimate the pain again, serpent. It's like if you continue to just walk that path, that's just all you're going to find.
Yeah.
Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And so a lot of really this album for me is just sort of like pointing out the enemies, the pitfalls,
Hmm.
the things that the paths that I go down that are that offer, promises, but they're empty.
Yeah.
And hopefully that can be that same sort of journey for listeners.
Yeah, and I think it's an important message, obviously, because I think so often we feel like we walk those paths alone, right? Like we're the
Hmm.
only person that's ever been
Hmm.
down this road. And so to hear others, sing about it or talk about it, it almost, not even almost, it gives you a little bit more power on it because now it's like,
Hmm.
oh, well, they've survived this, they've been through
Yeah.
this. Like I now stand a chance against it. So again, kudos to you because I think it is a really powerful message to say, like, it, not to get like too religious, but
Hmm.
it is the underlying tone where a lot of times the church doesn't want you to acknowledge the darkness or that
Hmm.
you have sinned and things like that, and you
Yeah.
have to some extent, obviously, but like I think what you guys do really well is kind of unashamed say like
Hmm.
we're broken humans too, but
Yeah.
there is a way through this.
Yeah. I mean, I hope my songs begin with the idea of, all right, let's be honest. You know,
Yeah.
like having a real conversation, because I completely agree with you. You know, there is a mentality, a religious mentality that says, well, of course, everybody has sins and failures and struggles, and everybody's broken, but like you can't be too broken, you
Right.
know? Like there is too broken, and I just categorically deny that because the Bible categorically denies it
Yeah.
because there's no there's two categories. You're either perfect or you're flawed.
Right.
And I only know one person that fit in that category, and that's why I'm trying to point to people to him in our songs, and I I don't want to like celebrate my flaws, like
Right.
they're flaw like my sin struggles. I hate them really,
Yeah.
um, but um, I found such comfort in the fact that I'm loved by God in Christ, be in spite of that
Yeah.
he has worked in such a way that I can be loved in that way. And you know that's what I'm desperate for people to see and to understand, because it's the most freeing truth. Everybody wants to be loved, and
Yeah.
unfortunately all this world has to offer is conditional love. And when we try to approach, God based on conditions, and say, well, God will love me if I'm dot dot dot. It's like he'll love you if you're perfect or if you receive grace.
Right.
And I would encourage you to take the second path, which is to come and receive grace. And that's what he calls out to all of his creation. So yeah, we're with this album, we're just trying to just take a journey, and it's a bit of a longer road, and hopefully people are willing to walk it, and it's not just like we're gonna tell the whole story in one song, you know.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. No, and I think, you know, again, the to your point about, there's two categories, right?
hmm
Perfect and imperfect or flawed or sinners or whatever label people want to put on it. But I think to your point with like you can't wait to be perfect to seek that salvation
hmm
because it's never going to come that way. Like
yeah,
you can't get to perfection without said salvation.
yeah,
So how hard do you want to work
yeah,
before you get there, you know?
yeah. I mean, I spent a large part of my life, um, thinking that like God loved me because he had to, but he didn't like me because I just continued to fail.
Yeah.
And for me, it was just a complete misunderstanding of the love of God and what, Jesus actually accomplished. Um, and so, and I think a lot of people sit in that world, whether they're inside or outside of the church. I think there's a lot of people in the church that feel that way, and a lot of people outside of the church that aren't interested in that, but they have that perspective. And we're trying to, you know, doubt those doubts for
Yeah.
people in our songs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to circle back to real quick to you made the comment that you don't want to celebrate the sins or the vanity that you've had over the
hmm
years and things like that. And I think it's important to kind of touch on that a little bit because there's a fine line, right, between I'm
hmm
celebrating it versus I'm acknowledging it,
Yeah.
and I think that's where, it I think you would agree it's okay to acknowledge that you've done these things and
hmm
survived and gotten through them. And in that, some people may misconstrue it as, oh, he's celebrating that,
hmm
not that you went through alcoholism or anything, but like
hmm
they got through this thing
Yeah.
and they're celebrating that. And it's like, well, no, he's celebrating that he got through the thing. The thing is the bad
hmm
part. Like he's
Yeah.
acknowledging the bad to celebrate the good on the other
Yeah.
side.
Yeah. And I think it is, there is a fine line there. And, like, because I think, especially like in rock and metal and heavier music, it can be really easy for people to glamorize sort
Mm-hmm.
of the broken artist.
Yeah.
And for me, like, it's really sad. There's lots of sad stories of those broken artists that, couldn't escape, the things that they dealt with. And I would never want that to be glamorized for somebody else, to want to just be like that artist,
Yeah.
in that way. And that's why we're trying to point people to hope and point people away from me. Like I'm, you know, there's people that look at me with, maybe respect or, um, look up to me within the realm of like Christians and faith. And to some degree, I appreciate that and I'm happy that I can be an encouragement that way, but I really don't want to be the focus of their attention. I'd rather them you know, see the beauty in who God is through Christ rather than think like, man, he's such a good guy. Like
Yeah.
if I can help you get there, just like I'll take a pat on the back, but like I'm not it.
Right.
It's
Yeah. Well, it goes back to kind of the old Emery had the bad Christian thing there for a while where it's like,
Mhm.
we want to help people get there and maybe deconstruct their own religious beliefs a little bit so that they can build the ones that are necessary for their salvation. And I think it's
Yeah.
important that people know that too, right? Like your journey, as similar as it may seem to somebody else, is going to have different pitfalls or different obstacles to overcome. So at the like again, whatever somebody struggles with, there are others that struggle with the same thing, but their solution is not always your solution.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very nuanced. Yeah, when you're talking about getting through some of those like tangible, um yeah, issues that you may be dealing with, or even if it is psychological as well. There is if there was a if there was just like a step-by-step manual, there'd be a lot of people freed from those struggles.
Yeah.
But it is very nuanced. It's kind of the difference between like a hard science and a soft science. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, if your leg's broken, it's pretty clear, what science has to say is, well, got to set the leg, put a cast, and then eventually it'll be healed, but when our minds are broken in different ways, it isn't that it isn't that simple at all. I mean, I can't say how many times, I've said to my wife, or even my wife and I just relating to one another with our own struggles, is just like, why do I think this way? Or why do I keep finding myself in this position?
Yeah.
And it's just a lot of you know, it's just a lot of lies that we've believed over the
Hmm.
years. And it's hard to unlearn them, especially the older you get. And it's really important to work through that because, yeah, the battle's fought in the mind. And that's really what a big part of what Wasteland is trying put, to build a world of things that I think, metaphors of what I think people deal with in their own minds,
Yeah.
and yeah, to kind of maybe disarm some
Yeah.
of the ways that we can think about these things, and to think about it through metaphor. Metaphor is easier pill to swallow sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. And I'm glad you brought up the like broken leg as a analogy.
Hmm.
So a friend of mine and I, we've talked about this many, many times. We had a 2 hour podcast about it, as a matter of fact. But she was talking about, we talk about the power of words, right? And
Hmm.
so a lot of people say that I have a mental illness when they're talking about depression or whatever. And while that's true and that may be the scientific term for it, a lot of times in friend groups and stuff, they hear the word illness and it's like, oh, but I'm not a doctor. I can't do anything for you.
Hmm.
But when you think of it as a mental injury, depression is my mental injury. Well, that's like a broken leg. I can,
Hmm.
if you just need me to take the weight off you for a little bit or,
Hmm.
sit with you, it changes the perspective. And I think it's interesting because so many people, when you think about just the day to day life, right? Like if somebody saw somebody with a broken arm trying to carry groceries, a lot of people are going to try to help and offer, let me take that for you.
Hmm.
The second, again, you mentioned, oh, I've got a mental illness. People are like, well, I don't know how to help, so I'm not going to offer anything. But hey, I've got this mental injury with depression, and this is what it does to me. Like, oh, well,
Hmm.
let's talk about that. So I think it's
Hmm.
cool that you bring that up because I think when we start thinking about mental health, it for some people becomes intangible because you don't see the brain, you don't understand how the brain can break. Um, so I think it's important to have those conversations with people too. That you know, just because you're going through something, you're not asking them to fix you. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
You're just asking for somebody to lean on from time to time or whatever. And to your point about not wanting to necessarily be a guide, if you will,
Hmm.
through somebody's journey. I think it is important because, like, mentoring to some extent or helping point the direction, yes, but like, I don't, I don't always want somebody, and I don't mean this in a bad way to anybody, but like looking up to someone becomes, oh, well, how close to idolization are you? Because now we're getting into dangerous territory with that as well.
Yeah, I mean that can develop a whole bunch of potential places to get hurt as well too.
Mm-hmm.
And that's usually where a lot of hurt sometimes originates too, is placing too much value on something, you know, that person or thing was never intended to carry the weight of that.
Yeah.
Um, because a lot of people, yeah, they carry a lot of baggage and pain from family and relationships. And it's hard because there's a reality in which there are things that people should really get from their family, but there is a limit, you know,
Mm-hmm.
like there are things that are completely fair to expect from your parents, or your siblings or your family, or spouse or whatever the relationship is. But there's a limit. And a lot of times, like, if this is how much you should be expecting from them, we're expecting these things. And that's why
Yeah.
we get so broken and so hurt over them at times as well. But the problem is a lot of people are hurt because they didn't even get that in the
Right.
relationship. And that's why there's so much hurt
Yeah.
and brokenness. And really what I, 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 I am realistic. I understand what the world is like, and I understand that I would be impressed if there was even a majority that like did that, but
Yeah.
it's probably a small minority. And for me, what I desperately want is, you know, for people to understand that, yeah, like I recognize that that's the reality for some people, but I believe that there's a greater love to be found in knowing the love of God, who
Yeah.
actually is able to shoulder and carry all of that, and also agrees with you that it's not right that you weren't cared for or loved in that way or protected or whatever that may be. Um, but that they would see their hope and their comfort and, assurance and love to be found there in a place that can't be shaken and can't be taken away. And
Yeah.
that's what I'm just fighting for personally. That's my life, really. Um, and that's where I want to, yeah, find all of my comfort.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So we've obviously kind of laid an extensive groundwork for the album, but I think it's good for people to understand like where the mentality is for some. Like obviously some
Hmm.
it's just surface level. They enjoy whatever.
Just want to
Uh,
listen to a track. Yeah, I get
right.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. So for those that want that deeper, I'm glad we were able to lay that. So let's
Hmm.
kind of shift now from conceptually where the album is to sonically. Like you guys
Cool.
worked really hard on this album, developing the sound. What goes into that with you guys when it comes to that part of the writing process for something that is, giving you a little bit of flowers here, something that is such a profound message, ensuring that you're delivering the emotion that you need to out of the sonics.
Yeah, I mean the biggest thing was just figuring out this, yeah, the story, and once I had that figured out and how we were going to separate everything, and um you know we realized we wanted to that the songs would kind of be like chapters of a story, and then we had to think about what should those chapters be and how should they feel. It's
Mm-hmm.
just like watching, you know any sort of series or movie that you're watching. There's movements to it, in the same way, if you've ever like thought about any soundtrack you've ever heard before, if you listen to what the beginning of the soundtrack sounds like and the end, and you can almost go like, how do these things fit together? You
Right.
know, um, that's really what we're trying to create. Because if you listen to that, the intro track, you
Mm-hmm.
know, we tried to make it sound really like tranquil and sort of like beautiful and peaceful, because it's really just depicting. It's supposed to feel like birth,
Yeah.
really, like our entrance into the world, and then you see what the next track is like. Is there's a turn, and it happens
Mm-hmm.
for everybody as you leave the comfort of your mother's womb, and you're thrusted into bright lights and discomfort for the first time, really.
Yeah.
Um, and then all that comes with that. And so, yeah, the figuring out how we wanted to tell the story really helped sort of dictate sonically how the songs are gonna communicate those feelings and those movements. So that part obviously was like challenging, but also
Yeah.
like really fun too.
Yeah. And I guess maybe easier feels like a cheap word to use for it, but maybe a little bit easier because it is a story that you're telling rather than someone that is doing a non-conceptual album entirely where it's just here's 12 songs that we made, like they
Hmm.
don't have to fit as well, things like that. But when you know
Hmm.
that the story's here, it's like, okay, I know I can transition from this to this. That's going to
Yeah.
be smooth and we know how to get there.
Yeah, and you're right. There are parts of it that were more complex than other albums, but there are also parts that were easier and more liberating. And the thing that I've just been thinking about is like, sometimes having some constraints is liberating because you're not thinking about like how like just a broad, wide open, it could be anything. It's like,
Right.
no, I actually know this needs to kind of do this. And then
Yeah.
it's just a matter of sort of working through and finding the right thing to do that. And so I've really enjoyed that because it's also just caused me to create different things too than what I would naturally do, because my mind is so focused. I kind of have like, I know where the dartboard is, at least.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
when you're sometimes when you're writing songs, you're just like you just feel like you're in space trying to throw darts and they're just like everywhere. Like I don't
Right.
even know where I'm supposed to be throwing right now. I'm just trying to create something.
Yeah.
But when I kind of like, oh, I have gravity. There's a dartboard over there. I just have to try and hit it now because I understand at least roughly what I'm trying to do. So,
Yeah. Yeah, and talk a little bit about like the ebbs and flows of the album, right? Like I've not got to hear the whole thing yet, but I've heard bits and pieces obviously.
hmm
There's very clearly kind of that cinematic feel to it to some extent. Like obviously it's
hmm
heavier than most cinematic movies, but like it's got the feel of like that storytelling, and
hmm
there's these ebbs and flows of like aggression and pain and turmoil, and then it kind of gives you that little bit of relief. How do
hmm
you find the space and kind of give yourself the permission to let off the throttle a little bit in some of that?
I mean, a lot of that is just natural for me creatively because I just yeah, I love there's tons of just brutal like heavy bands that I love that are just pedal to the metal all the time and like our our heaviest parts are like their softest parts, you
Right.
know. Um but like that's just part of things that I like, but it's definitely not all of what I like. And so I I love dynamic and so it just naturally comes out. Like even, on the track Law of the Land, um, you know, I knew where I wanted the song to go, and I felt like the best way to do that is to for there to be a bit of a breath in the bridge before we did, the super big part at the end.
Yeah.
Um, because there's also an opportunity to kind of a lot of those sections are sort of like I'm like narrating
Mm-hmm.
what's going on like in the character. I do a very similar thing in the track Pain that nobody's heard yet. But and so yeah, a lot of that just comes naturally because I love like the really small, soft and really big, raw dynamic together. And because one of my favorite bands is As Cities Burn, and their
Yeah.
first record, Son, I Loved You at Your Darkest, like they just did that in such a cool way. And so, yeah, I love trying to find ways to replicate the feeling they gave me in music.
Yeah. But not to get too artsy either, but it's kind of that like the beauty of the storm, right? Like there's
hmm
always that as the weather moves in, the sky starts to change colors and stuff, and it's almost
Yeah.
hauntingly beautiful. Then the
hmm
turmoil hits, and then the serenity after that storm, and it's like, oh, again, we survived this thing, and
Yeah.
life's gonna move on.
Yeah. Yeah. That is a really, as you were describing it, I was actually picturing, yeah, like, yeah, a small boat at,
Yeah.
at sea in the night, with a huge swell coming. And
Mm-hmm.
that is a lot of how I envision music at times. So that's cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. Let's talk a little bit about working with Josh from Spirit Box, because I
Yeah.
think people obviously Spirit Box has been blowing up, but I
hmm
think I just had this conversation with another artist last night, as a matter of fact. Like, there's so many insanely talented artists out there in
hmm
projects that don't get the love for the mixing and mastering and helping produce and all that.
hmm
What's it like working with someone that's in kind of a similar space, but also has a completely different ear for the project?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, so one, I would agree with you that, yeah, a lot of times people don't realize the impact somebody can have from behind the scenes, even if it's just giving an artist confidence and helping to, because there were songs that I brought to them. They were just like, no, it's not change anything. Let's just fine tune a bunch of these tiny little pieces. And other songs where they're like, hey, well, what if we cut this and did that? And
Yeah.
um, you know, for Josh, obviously being an artist and a creative, for his whole career, he's really, I can tell he's very mindful of like the fact that like I'm bringing some of my creation to him, and that
Right.
obviously like, there it's for me like the older I've gotten, the less that I hold on to like demo ideas, and have just gotten
Mm-hmm.
better at being really free with that. And kind of having an open hand with it. But the way that he handled that was really helpful too, recognizing the things that were good and but also just being honest about the things that he's just like, I don't think we need this here and cutting this out and doing that in a way that yeah, he's just caring about the song, you know.
Right.
Um and it was also very clear that it's like he's not trying to do something for himself to like make him look good or
Right.
I really do think that he was trying to, you know, just make us better. And I appreciate that because having done this for as long as we have, you know, um, it's very easy for people to not care.
Yeah.
You know, like
Yeah.
you're paying them, but like, you know, you don't know, like they could be giving you 20%. You wouldn't know.
Right.
And I could just tell that, Josh and Joseph, who was the mix and mastering engineer, and he actually engineered a few of the songs and vocals as well. Um, they cared and they want the best for us, and they were excited for people to hear the songs and were annoyed for how long it would have to be before people heard the songs, so that
Right.
just kind of showed that they cared and um, yeah, so great experience, and yeah, I mean, we're gonna be working with them for a while, as
Yeah.
long as we can afford them. That's basically, it's
Right.
probably the
But
case.
hopefully you'll get that friend rate at some point, right? Like we'll try
Yeah,
to
well,
keep
they're
it
my friends
manageable.
too, so I
Yeah.
wanna make sure I give them our friend rate, which is like
Right.
pay them what they're worth.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You said something in there that kind of struck me with you've become more free in letting go.
Hmm.
Do you think a lot of artists or yourself, even if you don't want to speak for other artists, sometimes struggle with being too close to the art? You know what I mean? Like you're so
Oh,
invested and too close to what you're trying to create to allow that critique or
yeah,
change.
yeah, and it's predominantly ego, it's ego driven, and there's a small percentage, of it's crazy how so many are, and I'm just going to speak generally, but
Yeah.
this is just coming through my experiences. Every artist has ego, but not every artist has that like hyper talent that comes with that same ego. It's like
Right.
everyone kind of has the same level of ego, but not the same level of hyper talent. And you know, but I have a lot of respect for anybody that has a clear vision of what they want to do and wanna and will work to accomplish that. Um, and I think for the most part, a lot of people feel that way. I feel that way about our music,
Mm-hmm.
but it's the I'm also just so interested in the unknown of what could we be,
Yeah.
where could we take songs, and I like feeling surprised by like, man, that's so cool. I didn't think that we could pull something like that off, or um, my favorite songs are the songs that I walk away going like, man, I can't believe that like that's gonna have our name on it.
Yeah.
Obviously people might hear it and be like, yeah, it's whatever song.
Right.
But if you've ever tried to write songs before and you really love something you made, like you know what that feeling is, which is kind of like you made something that you thought was beyond you.
Yeah.
Um, and it's cool to yeah, it's cool to just yeah, chase after that and have fun doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of art, let's talk about the visuals a little bit too. I think this
Cool.
often gets overlooked with music,
Hmm.
especially the album cover, things like that. You've got this really cool kind of grunge dystopian view, which is obviously on theme. When you're working on visuals, especially in a conceptual project like this, how important is truly nailing that theme rather
Hmm.
than kind of settling for, oh, we could just do a performance video, or oh, we could just do this.
Yeah, I mean, music videos are so hard because um one,
They're
how much can
expensive
you
as
get?
shit.
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely yeah, I can attest to that. I've got the receipts. Um um but they're so difficult because when you think about like what a song means to you as an artist, and you think about how in the world am I going to communicate, you know,
Yeah.
something of value and something that doesn't feel cheesy and something that isn't played out and done over and over again, but also does what it's supposed to do, which is like help promote the album because that's the
Right.
only reason why music videos exist, and really what, bands have tried to do is to just make that an extension of their art, and that's all that we're trying to do is do exactly that. But, the challenge just comes in the fact of all of our music videos have had bigger ideas than what we could deliver
Yeah.
in either budget wise or how long the song is, and so this time around, we just kind of just said it needs to be what we want it to be as best as we can within the constraints we have budget wise. And I could say what we got out of even I mean, the budget was expensive, but
Yeah.
even what we got for what we paid for, it looks like a whole lot more than what we paid for. And a lot of that is a testament to Garrett Drake and Kevin Johnson, who are the men behind the wheel, so to speak, of helping us bring this concept to life in a medium that we have no skills in.
And I think that's one of those tricks too, right? That like again, the passion for the art, but then recognizing where your shortcomings are. And I don't mean
Hmm.
shortcomings necessarily as a bad thing, but like we're musicians, not videographers, or we're,
Hmm.
we don't do set design. We just so like at some
Yeah.
point you kind of have to give up some of that. Um
Yeah.
and I think it goes back to something you said earlier too with, you know, finding the people that believe in the project with you
Hmm.
rather than
Yep.
holding their hand out for the paycheck because there's a
Yeah.
million of those guys, but
Yeah.
finding the ones that are like, dude, this is dope, I have to work on this, is somebody
Yeah.
else.
Yeah. And that's what they were, they were excited about it, and they began to, when they came back with their first ideas, I remember I just kind of like, so like the story I've written out, and what it's long. It's probably around 60 pages. But I just sent them like a 3-page synopsis with like
Yeah.
some pictures, and because I'm just so used to people not caring about all the depth and layers of things that I think
Right.
about, and I don't want to bore them. I'm trying to get people excited about the project, so it's like don't give them a bunch of homework.
Right.
But I sent it, and they sent back to me like a treatment that was just as long, just a rough idea that was just as
Yeah.
long as what I sent them, and I was like, "Whoa!" They were blown away by the concept, and then I was blown away by their first take on it, and I said, "I just didn't expect you guys to be as like stoked or invested in this. Like, here's some more information," and it just kind of grew from there. And yeah, for me, it was just more fun to maybe be somebody who was like, all right, here's my vision, but like go after it as you would, and just use me almost as like if somebody was trying to make a film out of a book, like
Hmm.
just like let me in on what you're making, and I'll kind of tell you like, yeah, that's kind of fitting of where I'm trying to go, but also give them freedom to to make it their own a little bit as well,
Yeah.
which Garrett did, 100%.
Yeah. Sounds like special edition is going to be like a comic book, right? Just
Yeah, I
self-publish a
mean,
comic book because everybody has that money, right?
yeah, I mean, I would love to. I was way into comic books as a kid, and yeah, uh, my dream would be for man, his name's escaping me right now, but he did all like the concept art for like Metal Gear Solid, the video
Oh.
game.
Uh-huh.
His like style is so cool. I'm like, if there's a comic book that was
Yeah.
in that style, I would be, I'd buy
Right.
it.
Right. And then if it could be your story too, like, hey,
Yeah,
even better, right? So
yeah.
um let's talk a little bit about, I love this question. I think I asked you it on eulogies as well. Uh Anytime an artist has a new project coming out, it's a love-hate question for the artist. What's the song that you think people are going to gravitate to off the album? And then what's that one that you think's a sleeper, but you're really hoping it hits them?
Well, I think the one that I think the one that people by and large will gravitate to the most is Death Clock. Um,
which you guys just dropped the video for,
yeah,
and yeah,
we just dropped the video for. There's one that, yeah, I guess, yeah, could be a sleeper, but I do really feel like our fan base is really gonna love is Memento Mori. Um, that's that's what I'll say.
yeah,
Um, just because it's a little bit deeper into the album, you know. And I mean, I look at the Spotify charts on our albums and every album, and you just see the numbers decrease as it gets further into the album, and
right.
it just makes me go like
It's
just listen to the whole thing.
it's the weird world we live in now, man. Like I was telling an artist the other day. So I just turned 40 a couple weeks ago,
Hmm.
and I remember going out buying albums, and all that, looking at liner notes. And
Yeah,
now it's like, well, it was on a playlist, so I heard that song, and it's like, do you at least go try to check out the artist at all?
I
Like, come
know.
on.
I know. That's what I always do. It's like, yeah, I feel like, yeah, people who don't know that struggle don't know how good they have it,
Yeah.
and how it's like, I don't know if you remember back in the day, but you could like scan a CD, at a CD, record
Yep.
store, and it would let you hear like a snippet of the song.
Yep.
Like even that was novel that I could get a little bit more, off of a deep cut,
Yeah.
because you're sitting there just like looking at all these records you could buy, and you're just like, I only have $20,
Right.
and you're like, I don't want to waste this record purchase,
But and
and
especially like, I mean, when we were growing up, like prices, I don't know what an album actually costs in a store now, like a true CD cost now, but like $7 to $9, give or take, when we were growing
mm-hmm,
up. And like to your
mm-hmm,
point, like I've got $20. I can buy two CDs
mm-hmm.
and maybe have enough to cover tax. Like
Yeah,
they better be the
exactly.
two that I want to listen to for the next month because I
Yeah,
have nothing else.
yeah, I know. But yeah, I mean, and we obviously were aware of that when we made the record, and we still wanted it to we wanted for people that take the album experience to have for it to be immersive in that way, but if somebody just wanted to grab a track, and listen to it on a playlist, it could still do the thing. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of, I may have said this during our eulogies talk too, but anytime a new album comes out, I believe that you have to listen to it front to back 3 times. I know we don't want to tell people how to digest it, but like for
Yeah.
you, obviously track listing and stuff, the sequencing is important. How
Mm-hmm.
important is it to you that people try to at least front to back it once or twice?
Yeah, I mean, there's on a number of levels, I would say, if you're a new listener, you've never heard of us before, um, I would say, yeah, front to back, because um, it's kind of like when you think about a lot of the bigger artists out there nowadays in the heavier realm, honestly, the two or three that come to mind are like Sleep Token, Spirit Box, Architects. These are all bands that care about making albums. Like
Mm-hmm.
they know that there are singles, but they're making albums,
Right.
um, and because it's a representation of where they are, and everything was thoughtful and intentional and purposeful.
Yeah.
And if you don't know us, I think you might be a little confused maybe to go back and just listen maybe to singles or to just move on. You might find something in the deep cuts that is actually for you that the
Right.
singles weren't for you. The singles are just there to draw you in, really. You pick them as singles to draw you in,
Yeah.
and to invite you to check out the album, because there's probably deeper elements of what you're liking in the album. So that would be my encouragement. Also, you're not gonna, if you are into the idea of the story, you gotta listen to it front to back.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, and also, I mean, I feel the same way. I have a play like I have two playlists on Spotify. One's called Workout,
Mm-hmm.
which we all
obviously, as a
know what
workout.
that's
Yeah.
doing for me,
Yeah.
and the other one is albums. And it's just
Nice.
basically albums that come out that I want to listen to, and I'll just put that on and I'll listen front to back, and after I feel like I've consumed it, if I like it, I'll keep it, and if I don't, I'll just, delete it and move
Right.
on. But I gave the album a shot.
Yeah.
And that's helped like bands grow on me. It's also helped make pretty clear, okay, I know I don't like this.
Right.
So
Right.
maybe you'll find out one of those two things when you listen to our album.
Yeah. And the two things on that, you mentioned the heavier artist, Sleep Token, Architects, Spirit Box. I mean, there's so many that are doing the intentional album, whereas I'm going to shit on pop music a little bit because I think pop artists typically are just chasing the singles.
Yeah.
Like, yes, it's going to come out on an album, but their whole goal, because they're on top 40 radio and everything else, is to be as viral as possible to get as many
Hmm.
plays. Whereas, and I don't want to say that none of them have meaning, but whereas a lot of the alternative music, the heavier music, there's so much depth and meaning to the songs that it's like, I couldn't you made the point earlier, I couldn't, if I wanted to, tell the story of Wasteland in a singular song. It
Yeah.
had to be an album.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, I was just actually like before 20 minutes before we started this podcast, I was watching an interview. It was just a reel, so I forget the name of the songwriter. I mean, he's like a huge songwriter for pop artists, and he actually made the point is he said any pop artist that had any real staying power cared about the album, you
Yeah.
know, and he was just saying he's like, if you're an artist who wants to be in pop music and you don't care about albums, you will not be great, basically.
Yeah.
And it, because he's right, like, anybody who's ever just been a one-hit wonder, that's what they're dubbed. Nobody looks
Mm-hmm.
at them as artists, even though they probably were, you
Yeah.
know. But like, if you're just chasing singles, you can miss on every single one of those singles. And then not only did those singles miss, the whole rest of your album is going to be a miss too.
Right.
And so, yeah, it is. I just think people, yeah, artists are going to try and make art, and that happens in an album. And it's not to say that can't happen in singles.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't think of any artist that I really like love who didn't make albums.
Yeah. Yeah. I would absolutely agree with that. Like, when you think about, especially, the emphasis of the word love, like, if I love an artist, it's because I've loved the body of work. But
Yeah.
if it's, I love a song, I may not care about that artist. There's
Yeah.
several singles that come to mind that I'm like, oh, I really like that song,
Hmm.
but I've listened to their other stuff and I just don't care because it
Yeah.
just didn't have the substance.
Yeah.
So I tell everybody too, my rule of thumb, the album comes out, it's got to be 3 times front to back. The first time's that
Hmm.
surface listen, just kind of feel it out. The second one, you're kind of really grooving into the music, starting to listen. And then that third one is all about the lyrics and like really trying to follow along with what that message is. And I think that process for me anyway, I have a buddy that absolutely hates that I tell him to do that. He's like, I don't have time to do that. And I'm like, bro, I've seen your Spotify Wrapped. We're close to the same number of hours. You've got
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
but like that third listen when you're digging into the lyrics, I think to your point is when you start discovering like, oh well, I don't think I cared for track 1 and 2, but man, track 3 has something in here that I
Hmm.
really resonate with. And I
Yeah.
think that's the importance of really trying to give it real attention too. Like, playing it in your car is one thing, but if you can actually sit and focus on the music and let it take you
Hmm.
wherever it takes you, it's going to be a golden time.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, a lot of my favorite bands and artists have grown on me,
Mm-hmm.
At first, like Deftones was one of those bands that when I first heard, I was like, okay, this is cool. It's a little strange.
That's
And
exactly how
I,
I was. My brother was a big fan, and I was like, I
yeah,
just don't get it, man. I don't get it.
yeah, yeah. And there's been plenty of bands like that for me. I mean, even as Cities Burn, the first time I heard it, I was like,
Mm-hmm.
what did I just listen to that when I heard that first album? Because it was just so different.
Yeah.
than things I was used to listening to. And I was like, but I was still intrigued because I just remembered these little pockets of things that I enjoyed. And I was like, well, let me go back and find where those things were. But like back in the day on a CD player, you just like, just go to track one, just play it again,
Yeah.
There's no scrolling through.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I mean, yeah, I would say probably half of my like favorite artists all came through that like slow burn.
Yeah. And again, I think it comes down to that authenticity, and then recognizing parts of the album or the song or whatever that resonates, and it kind of hooks you in.
Yeah.
And again, I think this is a beautiful piece of work that has a lot of potential to do that for people, especially if they listen to this podcast and understand that base level of like, this is where the message is, and this is
Hmm.
how it can affect me. And again, that's not to take anything away from anybody that's a Wolves at the Gate fan that just loves the heavy and dichotomy
Hmm.
of the songs. If
Hmm.
you enjoy it, you enjoy it. We don't care if you love the message.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It's just kind of like you don't want the chef coming out and telling you, like, did you like the meal? And you're like, yes. And you're like, well, did you like this part? Well, I don't know. I just liked all of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Did
Like,
you
I'm not gonna
notice
get,
the
yeah,
cinnamon that I added in there?
yeah.
Like, no, I didn't.
I'm not gonna get mad at you because of that. I'm glad anybody appreciates it. It's an honor when somebody likes something you created. Um, I never thought that that day would come. I thought that I would just write songs in my room and they'd never see the light of day.
Yeah.
So it is a privilege for sure to have an audience that wants to listen and also like yeah, nowadays people approach music going, I want this song to do this for me. And it's like what? Like
It
just
is
listen
weird.
to the song and see if like a lot of times, especially like in the heavy music world, people are like, I want this to be brutal and to be shocked by this thing. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, are you really wanting to be, you're anticipating shock.
Yeah.
Just maybe you just listen to the music. You can experience it without looking for like when's the super brutal breakdown or when is somebody gonna like say something really shocking,
Yeah.
there's some memes in heavy music that, obviously there are there's predictability, but like it's song structure. Like
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with that. And also if bands don't want to have song structure, that's cool too. But stop coming to songs assuming or expecting, you know, it's crazy how there's like this post-hardcore resurgence that's come through
Mm-hmm.
because I grew up listening to songs that had no song structure, because
Yeah.
I was like, that was the era of music I grew up in and loved that post-hardcore sound and feel, um, and how that's been brought back in a cool way. But there's also people who are just like, oh, they don't like if a heavier song has song structure. It's like, this is how songs have been made forever, and it's
Literally,
okay.
historically.
Yeah, it's okay. Like song structure is not bad, and it's not that you're not creative if you use song structure. It's just a way that you're trying to, um, yeah, employ like your creativity in that
Yeah.
way. And we did that for a long time, and I've just kind of landed back to the way that I wrote songs in the beginning, which is with a almost traditional structure.
Yeah.
But there's a way to break tradition and be unconventional, even in, you know,
Yeah.
heavy music listeners are crazy because like nobody would listen to our songs like that listens to normal music and go like, yeah, that's a normal structure. Like, no, it's
Right.
wild,
Yeah.
like it's not normal to most people. But yeah.
Yeah. No, it is. It's funny too, because like you said, there's so much expectation that people put on these songs. Um, and it's like, I guess for me, it's one of those things where like you could expect certain things from certain artists, right? Like I
Hmm.
expect Wolves at the Gate is going to have some gnarly breakdowns from time to time, but I'm not going into a song going like, where is it? Like, or
Yeah.
why wasn't it as heavy as it what I feel like
Yeah.
it should have been? And at
Yeah.
that point, like, not to rain on anybody or whatever, but like, if you wanted that type of song, go write that type of song. Nobody's
Yeah.
stopping you from being that creative and going and writing the sickest breakdown that's ever existed.
Yeah.
And I think interesting because, as we wrap up here, those expectations are, I think, what causes disconnect between albums a lot of times, where, oh, I was a really big fan of their first album, but I, didn't love the second. And it's, well, because you had the expectation that it was going to be the first album again.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're right. And I see this happen with, yeah, really big artists and small artists alike. And um yeah, and I've been guilty of that before too as a, but I think the proper response, you may not like an album from one to two or from two to
Mm-hmm.
three, and that's completely fine. But to basically like hold a grudge against them because they
Right.
didn't do what you wanted them to do, it's like, well, the ball's really in their court because it's
Yeah.
their music.
Yeah.
They weren't looking for there wasn't a suggestion box, before they started running the album.
That'd be a wild idea, man.
Yeah. Oh man, yeah. That would be a very interesting experiment, but not a very interesting reality.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's just is and that it's okay. An artist may make an album that isn't as much for you. It was for them in that time, and maybe the next one will do that. But I think it's more so fun to maybe approach a new album kind of like like a kid or a child
Mm-hmm.
again, where you just don't have any expectations because the world is a little bit smaller to you, and just go, I just want to hear what this is and not expect anything. And I've enjoyed albums way more doing that, just going, yeah, and not just no preconceived notion, you know. Um, so, but I think it does get harder. The more you're into a band, the harder it is
Yeah.
to do that.
Yeah, for sure. Um, Again, Steve, I've really enjoyed this conversation. As we transition to the end here, for anybody that's still listening, Wasteland comes out May 30th via Solid State. So, we definitely want you guys go over, pre-order it, pre-save it, do all that. That's all great for the algorithms and all that fun stuff that's behind the scenes that nobody wants to hear about.
Yeah.
Um, Without getting in trouble from the label or PR, what can people expect for the remainder of 2025? You've got the album dropping. Is the intent to try to get out on the road and showcase a little bit?
Yeah, we definitely want to play some shows. That's in the works. And we also are working on a lot of music. We have we have not stopped writing songs at all since 2022 and to the present day.
Yeah.
So it's been a lot of writing and working on songs, and um, we're trying to to yeah, just give people more, really. That's what we're getting after. So
Yeah, awesome. um Obviously I'll link all the socials and everything, but best place to find you guys and interact, where do you want the interaction? What's driving the socials for you?
where do I want the interaction? Well, a nuanced question, but yeah. I mean, Instagram sense tends to be like the sort of central hub of things. So Instagram, Twitter, I mean Facebook. I try my best to. I think that's the one I interact with on the least.
Yeah.
Just because I think by the time I'm done with Instagram, I'm like barely have enough energy for Twitter, and then
Yeah.
Facebook, I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about you.
Yeah.
But all of
I think
those
it's fair.
all those social media platforms and YouTube and all that nonsense. But yeah, you can find everything you need to know there. And if it's not there, it wasn't worth saying. So
Yeah. Awesome, man. I've enjoyed catching up with you. I think this album is poised to be, without blowing smoke up your ass. Like, I think it's one of your strongest works. I think it's one of the strongest messages, and hopefully it resonates with the right people, because I think
cool.
it's such an important um, thing to remember. Right? Like, we've
Hmm.
all walked these paths. There is light on the other side. You can get there. You just have to put in the work.
Hmm. Yeah, well, I appreciate the kind words, and yeah, I'm looking forward to everybody getting to yeah, enjoy it front to back. So not too long from now.
Yeah, just a couple weeks here. So
Yeah,
awesome, man. I appreciate it. Definitely, I'll keep you posted on when this goes live and all that sort of stuff. And hopefully we'll catch you out on the road.
sounds good. All right, thanks,
Awesome.
Josh.
Thanks.